The morning mist had not yet lifted over the hills when Damien Cross stepped out of his carriage, dressed in plain brown clothes instead of his royal robes. He looked nothing like the alpha king of the Blackthorn pack. His boots were scuffed, his shirt was simple cotton. A worn leather bag hung over his shoulder, just like any traveling worker looking for a job. No one who passed him on the road would have believed that this quiet man held the power to command thousands of wolves with a single word. Damien had planned this trip for weeks. His advisors had found his fated mate, the woman his wolf had been calling out for since the day he turned 18. She lived in the Ashford pack, a smaller territory that answered to his throne. Normally, a king would send guards ahead, announce his arrival, and let the whole pack prepare a grand welcome. But Damien did not want a grand welcome. He wanted the truth. He had learned long ago that people showed their real faces only when they thought no one important was watching. He wanted to see his mate as she truly was, not as she would pretend to be in front of a king. So he hid his identity, gave himself the name Dane, and walked straight to the gates of Ashford Manor, asking for work. The steward, a tired old man with kind eyes, looked him up and down. "We need extra hands in the kitchen and the stables," the man said. "Pay is small, and the mistress of the house is not an easy woman to please. But if you don't mind hard work, you can stay." "I don't mind hard work," Damien said. He was led through the back gate, past rows of vegetable patches and a large stone well, into the servants' quarters at the rear of the manor. The building was old, its walls covered with climbing vines, but there was a coldness to the place that had nothing to do with the weather. That evening, Damien was given a bowl of thin soup and a hard piece of bread. He ate slowly, watching the other servants around him. They spoke in low voices, their eyes darting toward the main house every few minutes, as if afraid someone was listening. "New here?" asked a young man beside him. "Just arrived today," Damien answered. "Watch yourself," the young man whispered. "The mistress does not like mistakes, and stay away from her daughters. They enjoy finding reasons to complain." Damien nodded, though his mind was already elsewhere. His wolf stirred inside him, restless, as if it could feel something, someone, nearby. It was a pull he had felt only in stories told by older wolves, the kind of pull that could not be explained, only felt. He did not have to wait long to understand it. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Damien was sent to help carry water from the well to the kitchen. As he crossed the courtyard, he saw a young woman kneeling by the flower beds, her hands covered in dirt, pulling weeds with quick, practiced movements. Her dress was faded and patched at the sleeves. Her dark hair was tied back with a simple cloth, strands falling loose around her tired face. The moment Damien's eyes landed on her, something inside his chest turned over completely. His wolf let out a silent howl of recognition. "Mate." He stood frozen for a moment, the bucket of water forgotten in his hand. She looked up, sensing someone watching, and their eyes met. Hers were a warm brown, gentle, but guarded, like someone who had learned to expect disappointment. "You're new," she said simply, breaking the silence. "Be careful with that water. If you spill it, they'll take it from your pay." "Thank you for the warning," Damien said, finding his voice again. "I'm Dane." "Elena," she replied, and returned to her weeding. Just like that, she went back to her work, as if speaking to him meant nothing at all, but to Damien, it meant everything. This quiet, tired young woman kneeling in the dirt was his fated mate, not a pampered daughter of the house, as he had expected, but a servant girl herself. Over the following days, Damien learned her story, piece by piece, through careful, patient observation. Elena was not truly a servant by birth. She was the daughter of the previous alpha of Ashford pack, a kind and fair leader who had died in an accident 3 years earlier, along with his wife. After their deaths, Elena's stepmother, a distant relative who had married into the family only a year before the tragedy, took control of the pack's affairs. She declared herself the rightful guardian of the territory until Elena came of age. But when Elena turned 18, no title was passed to her. Instead, she found herself scrubbing floors and carrying water for the very woman who was supposed to protect her inheritance. The stepmother's 2 daughters, Priscilla and Vivian, lived in comfort upstairs, wearing fine dresses and giving orders, while Elena slept in a small room near the kitchen and worked from sunrise to sunset. Damien watched all of this unfold with a growing weight in his chest. He worked alongside Elena in the kitchen, in the stables, in the garden, and every day he saw new proof of her strength. She never complained. She never raised her voice, even when Vivian mocked her patched dress in front of the other servants. She simply did her work, quietly, with a patience that Damien found almost impossible to understand. One evening, after a long day of chores, Damien pretended to injure his hand while chopping wood. It was not true, but he wanted to see how Elena would react to someone else's pain. She noticed immediately. "Let me see that," she said, setting down the basket she was carrying. She examined his hand carefully, her fingers gentle, despite the roughness of her own skin. "It's not deep, but you should clean it properly, or it will get worse." She led him to a small bucket of clean water, kept aside for the servants, and washed his hand herself, wrapping it with a strip of cloth she tore from her own apron. "You didn't have to do that," Damien said quietly. "You barely know me." Elena shrugged. "Doesn't matter. No one deserves to suffer alone, even over something small." That single sentence stayed with Damien long after the sun went down. Here was a woman who had every reason to be bitter, to think only of herself after everything that had been taken from her, and yet her first instinct was still kindness toward a stranger. The mate bond pulled harder with each passing day, urging Damien to reveal himself, to lift her out of this life immediately. But he held back. He wanted to understand the full truth first, not just what he could see, but what was hidden beneath the surface. He began to notice small, troubling details. Late at night, the stepmother often met with a messenger near the back gate, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Documents were exchanged. Damien, using his heightened wolf senses, listened from the shadows one night and heard something that made his blood run cold. The stepmother was planning to send Elena away, not to another household as a servant, but into an arranged bond with a neighboring alpha, known throughout the region for his cruelty. It was not a marriage born of love or respect. It was a transaction, meant to erase a debt the stepmother owed to that alpha's family. Elena would be handed over like property, with no say in her own future. Damien's wolf raged inside him, but he forced himself to stay calm. He needed proof of everything before he acted, not just to protect Elena, but to understand why the stepmother would go to such lengths. The answer came a few nights later, when Damien was sent to clean the study while the family attended a gathering in town. Searching through old records, careful not to disturb anything, he found a hidden drawer beneath the main desk. Inside was a stack of letters, tied together with faded string. The letters revealed a truth far darker than Damien had imagined. Elena's parents had not died in a simple accident, as everyone believed. The stepmother had arranged it, working with the same neighboring alpha she now planned to sell Elena to, in exchange for control of the Ashford packlands and its resources. It was a plan built on betrayal, patient and cold, carried out over years. Damien sat in the quiet study, the letters trembling slightly in his hands, and understood that he could wait no longer. The next evening, the household gathered for dinner, a rare occasion when even the servants were called to serve at the main table for a visiting guest, the very alpha the stepmother intended to give Elena to. Elena stood near the wall, her eyes lowered, doing her best to remain unnoticed as introductions were made. Damien walked into the dining hall, still dressed as a servant, carrying a tray of food, but as he set the tray down, he did not step back into the shadows as expected. Instead, he stood tall, and something in the room shifted immediately. His presence changed. The quiet, humble servant disappeared, replaced by the unmistakable aura of an alpha king, powerful, commanding, impossible to ignore. Every wolf in the room felt it instantly, their instincts bowing to something far above their own rank. The stepmother rose from her chair, confusion and fear crossing her face. Who are you?" "My name is Damien Cross," he said, his voice steady and clear. "Alpha King of the Blackthorn Pack, and ruler over every territory under its protection, including this one." Gasps filled the room. The visiting Alpha, who had come expecting an easy arrangement, went pale and lowered his head in forced respect. Priscilla and Vivian froze in their seats, their earlier mockery of a simple servant, now replaced by pure panic. Damien placed the stack of hidden letters on the table in front of the stepmother. These belong to you, I believe. They explain quite clearly how the previous alpha and his wife truly died, and how you have used their daughter as a servant in her own home while planning to sell her away like property." The color drained completely from the stepmother's face. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. There was nothing she could say that would undo what was written in her own handwriting. Elena stood frozen near the wall, staring at Damien in complete shock. The servant she had bandaged, the man she had spoken to so casually, the one who had worked beside her in the dirt and the kitchen smoke, he was a king, her king, and somehow, impossibly, her fated mate. "You," she whispered, "you're Dane." Damien turned to her, and for the first time since he arrived, he let his true self show completely. Not just his rank, but the warmth and honesty that had been there all along, hidden beneath the servant's disguise. "I wanted to know who you truly were before I told you who I am," he said gently. "I needed to see your heart, not just your name." Guards who had been waiting quietly outside, alerted by a signal from Damien earlier that day, entered the hall and took the stepmother into custody, along with proof of her crimes to be judged before the Pack Council. The visiting alpha, realizing his own involvement had just been exposed, was seized as well, his plans for Elena crumbling apart in an instant. In the days that followed, the truth spread quickly through Ashford Pack. Elena, the girl who had scrubbed floors and carried water, was restored as the rightful heir of her family's territory. The council formally recognized her claim, and with Damien standing beside her, not as a disguised servant this time, but as the Alpha King and her fated mate, no one dared question her place again. Elena struggled at first to believe that her life had changed so completely, so quickly. She sat with Damien one quiet evening, in the same garden where they had first met, the flower beds she once weeded now cared for by others. "I keep waiting to wake up," she admitted softly. "Waiting for someone to tell me it was only a dream." Damien took her hand, the same hand she had once bandaged with a piece of her own apron. "It's not a dream. You survived years of unkindness, with more grace than most people could manage in a lifetime. You earned everything that is yours." Elena looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for any hint of doubt, and found none. Slowly, for the first time in years, a genuine smile spread across her face. "I'm glad you came as a servant first," she said. "If you had arrived as a king from the beginning, I might never have known you at all. Not really." Damien smiled back, understanding exactly what she meant. Their bond had not been built on titles or crowns. It had been built on small kindnesses, quiet honesty, and the simple truth of who they were beneath everything else. As the sun set over Ashford Manor, casting a warm golden light across the garden, Damien knew with complete certainty that disguising himself as a servant had given him something no royal introduction ever could: the knowledge that Elena's heart was every bit as extraordinary as her blood, and that their bond, forged in humility, would carry them both for the rest of their lives.